All right, and hello everybody. Today I am joined by David from Lingopie. Do you want to introduce yourself, David?
Sure. I am David, the David Datney, the CEO of Lingopie, co-founder. Originally from New York. Now I kind of, split my time between New York, London, Tel Aviv. We are a language learning platform. I like to think of ourselves as the Netflix of language learning, if you can imagine. So that's kind of our raison d'etre. We take real movies and TV shows, and then from all over the world, we license that content. We work with production companies, distributors, broadcasters, just like Netflix, and then we'll add a language learning layer on top of that content, which de facto turns it into a lesson. So so people can watch and learn, immerse with great content from around the world. And my background is in startups and things like that. This was an itch that I wanted to scratch. My co-founder as well, and we basically we built something, and here we are today. Happy to share more as we kind of do our chat here.
Yeah, so to
And
give
it's a
some
pleasure. It's obviously
context,
a pleasure to be here.
it is a pleasure to have you, David. There was like a month gap from my initial contact with you before we could get our schedules together. So I'm glad to finally have this opportunity to talk to you and to talk about Lingopie. So for everybody listening, Lingopie is a subscription service that is sort of like a combination of Netflix and a language learning meta layer. So they license content. They have like a library of content, and you don't need any third-party tools. You can just go to the website or download the app, and you can make flashcards, audio video flashcards. You can do lookups, tap the word or click the word and get a definition. And I think that's really cool. I think it's nice to have it. What makes Lingopie fresh is that it's all in one package. You can download
Exactly.
a meta layer that will make subtitles selectable, and then you can download your own pop-up
Sure.
dictionary, and you can do all of these things. And that's really popular. There are free and open source alternatives, but what I have learned is people like the convenience. And Lingopie is plug and play. You sign up,
Yeah.
you make an account, and then you can use it.
Yep, exactly. But we also put a lot of emphasis on the quality of the translations. And we do have a team that looks at all the languages and constantly is tweaking everything on the back end. So we have a machine learning layer on the back as well, which is optimizing everything that's happening on the translations. One interesting thing we do with, you mentioned our clickable subtitles, is actually we're joining words into short phrases and idioms and all kinds of slang as well, because what we found is that learning individual words, that's okay, and learning it in context, of course, is better. But when you can learn short phrases or words that kind of are commonly used together, it's much easier, especially in context. And that's kind of one of the things that we've done really well is throughout all our subtitles, we've really done we build short phrases and everything, and we see that it really improves people's speed of acquisition of vocabulary and things like that.
Now, you said earlier that this was sort of an itch that you and your
Yeah.
partner, your co-founder, had to scratch. So what made you decide to start sort of a language learning
Mm.
tool startup?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you spend your time in Tel Aviv, in addition to New York and London. And Tel Aviv is not an English-speaking country. Did moving to Tel Aviv have any sort of role in becoming a language learner?
Yeah, definitely. It was a bit of a culture shock when I came here. So this is going back about 15 years ago. I came here, I didn't speak a word of Hebrew, nothing. And then I got here and I basically said, this is really cool. It's a fun place. Beach, sun. Good food. But you know what? I want to feel local. I want to kind of dive into the culture. I don't want to be just a tourist. And so I started taking some, traditional language learning classes.
Did you do the
Where
Ulpan thing?
Upan, exactly. So I started taking some Upanim, and I started, and these are intense classes. These are like 8:30 to like 3:30 all day, for 6 months. And what I found was it was like really challenging, really frustrating, constantly and I spent a lot of time doing homework, reviewing, and it was just I honestly like I didn't feel like I was making progress. Everyone around me, I looked around, everyone around me was in the same boat. We were all really struggling, it was really challenging. And of course that really killed a lot of my motivation for sticking around and just what I was doing here. But and I had a lot of friends, local friends, and Israelis, but I would speak to them in English, and then I would ask them. One day it occurred to me to ask them, "How did you learn English so well?" Like, it's kind of strange to me that they all spoke English. The cab driver speaks English. The guy who served me my falafel speaks English. You know what I mean? And then I was looking at myself like, am I so, like, what's wrong with me? Like, I am doing this and I can't pick it up. So I asked them, I said, how did you learn English? Or they said, "Oh, I just watch TV shows and movies." I was like, this makes no sense. Like, doesn't make sense. Like, look, again, I'm studying. I'm, breaking my teeth every day, and I can't do it. So I started doing it myself. So I started watching kind of TV shows with some Hebrew TV shows with Hebrew subtitles. So Israeli TV is actually unique because every
They
TV show on
sub everything.
everything has Hebrew subtitles. So it's kind of weird as an American. You're like, here's a Hebrew show with Hebrew subtitles, and you're just like, why would you do that? But then it was like so amazing.
I've noticed that. My only complaint there is they
Mm.
hard code those subtitles. Like they're part of the video. So one thing that
Exactly.
I've run into with Refold and helping people like learn Hebrew through immersion, I'm like, there's lots of matching text, same language subtitles out there,
Exactly.
but you can't select it. It's always hard coded and embedded into the video.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. So at the time I used it to my advantage, but I did it in like this is probably like 2010. So there was none of these tools available. I was like stopping the video on this like tiny little player, and excuse me, I was stopping the video and selecting and looking it up in a dictionary, and then writing it down on like my word list, transferring it to flashcards, super manually. It would take me 2 hours to watch this like short video, and it was just. But you know what? What was amazing was after a couple episodes of doing this, I just noticed that my ear was getting, as we say, getting phonologically trained to the pentameter of the language, and I was getting real comprehension, which I'd never had before. And it was amazing because it felt like magic, right? So like when Clayton, I'm sure you relate. What the first time someone speaks to you and you like understand it, and you're not just like totally confused. It feels like magic. Language learning feels like magic when it works, right?
For sure. That's sort of what we at Refold call the Eureka moment, where you got it, you grasp it, things are coming together.
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
it definitely it feels like magic. And even to this day, I started my language learning journey back in like 2004, maybe. Even to this day, I still find it wild that you can understand another language without thinking, as long as you have enough input that's comprehensible and you use a tool like,
Exactly.
Lingopie. So your experience learning
Yeah.
Hebrew it sounds great. I mean, I'm glad that you learned it, but it doesn't sound like it was the smoothest thing.
No,
It
no,
was
it
very
wasn't.
clunky, a lot of friction.
Yeah,
Did
and
that have
again,
any role in your design of Lingopie, like making
yeah.
something lower friction?
Totally. So it never, like, again, going this is going back 2010. Never thought about like turning this into a language learning product or launching, a company that would do this or helping anyone else learn a language at the time. I just thought it was a really amazing way and a really fun way to learn Hebrew personally. My background was working in a startup, so I worked at a number of different startups. And that was really my experience, is like building products, growing products, creating amazing user experiences for people on the technology side. And then probably around 2017, 2018, in a company I was working at, I was talking to a friend of mine who would become my co-founder, Roy, and he came from the television and film world as a background before working at the startup. And I obviously, and we were chatting, and I told him this experience I had with learning Hebrew, the story exactly as I shared with you. Um, and he said, well, that's how I learned English, because when he was growing up, and it was just, we had this kind of aha moment. We said, you know what? I think we could build something like this, and and again, maybe no one in the world is going to care, maybe no one in the world is going to be interested, but we're interested in this. So we actually built a really basic version, launched it on Reddit. This is probably 2009, 18, 19, something like that. I already lost track. Threw it out there. I think it was for Russian at the time, because that's what we were able to get some content for Russian. And the most amazing thing happened within like hours. Thousands of people were messaging us saying, hey, do you have it for Swedish and Hungarian and Italian? We're like, no, we don't have any of those. But what it told us was that there's an amazing opportunity, and there's a world of people who want to learn with TV shows and movies in this methodology. So that really kind of got us going. And we were working on the product for a while. We met, obviously, we built it out a bit more substantially. We were able to raise some venture financing from some amazing investors, great angels in the gaming space, in the technology space. And then, ever since then, we've been plugging away, working really hard, trying to build, the best product we can for language learners with television and film.
I had no clue that it started with Russian. Most of these things tend to start with like something like English or Spanish.
Sure. Well, I understood a bit of Russian at and so I would be able to, so, again, it was something interesting to try. And one of our first engineer was a Russian speaker. So it was like, it was helpful. Otherwise, I think we would have, it would have been,
But the stars
more difficult.
aligned. You
Yeah.
happen
It
to
was
have
like,
some Russian background yourself. Your first engineer spoke Russian, and then the important thing is you were able to, I guess, license the content.
Exactly. So that was always a focus early on, and we built out, quite a substantial licensing team. My like I said, my co-founder comes from television and film, from the film world, so that's always been really important to us, licensing great content. And again, remember, the content is produced for the local audience, right? So if it's German content, it's produced for native speakers in Germany. So our challenge has always been, how do you take that amazing, great local content, the content that gives you a peek into the people, the place, the culture, the food, all those things that get us excited about learning a language, right? And then how do you use that for people who are beginners and intermediates who don't have, may not understand the vocabulary and the grammar, but again, to create an immersive environment around that content.
Okay. And you mentioned that you started with Russian,
Mhm.
but the last time I had a look at Lingopie, you guys supported a whole bunch more languages. What languages do you guys support right now?
So today we support 10 languages, so Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Russian, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and now we're starting to dabble in English as well in certain markets.
And you support 10 languages from English. What languages do you support English for?
Uh, so we support. So I believe. So we are going through So again, our main focus has been, let's say, the English, for English learners to learn, these other languages. So obviously it's all built on language pairs, right?
Mhm.
Um, on the other side, we are localized. The product is localized for Spanish, French, German, Italian, Portuguese right now. And we're slowly adding additional languages for those markets. And English is supported for all of those markets. So anyone who is a native speaker of those languages should be able to get access to English. And again, we're one of our big initiatives for this year is actually, even if we don't like teach that language. For example, right now we currently don't teach Swedish or Greek, but we will in the future. We still want to be able to offer a native language learning experience for those people for any of these 10 languages. So we want to be able
Okay,
to service that language pair, even if we don't teach that language currently.
gotcha. Yeah, I think that would be very useful because I definitely, at least from my perspective, uh, things are less accessible for people who don't already speak English.
Exactly.
Very rarely are you going to have a service where you can learn English from Greek, for example.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
what does
Or Russian to Greek or Italian to Greek, right?
it take to get a language supported on Lingopie? I imagine a
Yeah.
lot goes into it. You've got engineers who work on, handling the dictionaries and the
Yeah.
definitions and licensing content.
Yeah. Those it is a bit of a kind of a process. Number one, of course, we have to go and license the content. So we build partnerships with usually major studios. So, for example, in Germany, we work with ZDF, which is like the BBC of Germany. In Spain, it's RTV, which is the BBC of Spain, so we build those partnerships. Then we license that content, we take that content in, we ingest it, and then we have again an AI ML engine that does a lot of analysis on that content to be able to understand whether it's appropriate, like what level it's appropriate for. We look at the pentameter of the dialogue, the conversation. We look for different things in the audio just to give us a sense of like, who's it going to be good for? Can we use it for our purposes of language learning? And when we build out a dictionary, we do a bunch of different things on the AI and the ML side. So we do what's called word collocation, which is joining the different words and phrases together. We've built out our own dictionaries to, again, provide what we think is the best contextual translation for what's happening in the subtitle, right? So it's not the let's say the dictionary translation, because many times the dictionary translation isn't what's happening in the contextual meaning, and that's really important for us, because when you're watching something, we want to give you the contextual meaning while you're watching.
Yeah,
What else
that
goes
can definitely
into
be
it?
a barrier.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. So we put a lot of work into that. So for Japanese and Chinese, Mandarin, we obviously have to work on adding more than one subtitle. So, for example, for Japanese, we're adding multiple subtitles. I think it's like there's Romanji and katakana, hiragana. I think we have a couple others in there. The same thing for the Chinese. You have the pinyin, right? So many times we're supporting multiple types of subtitles. So that's obviously a technical challenge. Right now, to give you guys a peek, Hebrew, Turkish, and Arabic are coming. So Hebrew, I know obviously Hebrew and Arabic are right to left languages, so that we have to kind of we have to flip everything that we do, and that's a challenge. So
How do
there's a lot
you?
that goes into it.
Yeah, right to left is a nightmare to work with, especially if you've got right to left text in the middle of a normal left to right text.
Oh
Uh,
my God, yeah,
that could
yeah,
Yeah, that can be a nightmare. I've made lists of things like spreadsheets, and it got to the point where I would just put the Romanized name of something in Hebrew or Arabic because I got
sure,
tired of the right to left messing up everything else. Um,
exactly,
so you're adding Hebrew and Arabic.
yeah.
That is interesting. You've got the challenge of the right to left text, but how do you handle the fact that they don't really write vowels? You know, ho- is there any plan in place to like
To add vowels,
vocalize it to like include vowels? Like, I don't know, I guess in Hebrew you've got nikud,
yeah,
right,
and it
where you
could,
can like dot and
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's a lot of things that you can do. Or how are you going to handle that?
Yeah, so usually, so the way, so Hebrew, I think what will, one of the things we've done, so just to give you an example of Russian or anything where we use it's a different alphabet, we also provide, like you said, the Romanized or like the transliterated version, right? So that helps you kind of learn the alphabet and the pronunciation in kind of something that you're more familiar with. We don't necessarily have to kind of teach you individual like um, vowel placement, and with the vowel it's more about like the pronunciation. Okay, you like once you learn what those letters are, you can kind of fit it in written Hebrew, like day-to-day Hebrew. Nobody uses um, any vowels. Like you'll never see vowels short of like a religious text or like a small children's book. Even then, that nobody uses vowels. It's like, but you kind of get used to it because it's Hebrew. And again, I'm less familiar with Arabic, but it's very formulaic. Everything is very, very formulaic. There's much less exceptions in pronunciation. Compared to what we see in English. So English is, they're just like, there's all kinds of stuff in there, and there's all kinds of exceptions. But Hebrew is much more formulaic, so you learn pretty quickly without it. That's just, again, from my experience. I can't speak for Arabic, but we have a number of Arabic speakers on our team as well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's what I would do. I would definitely include a romanization option um, for new learners.
It helped me for Russian. That I was a big proponent of adding it for Russian. Everyone's like, why do you need it for Russian? I was like, because I'm kind of lazy to learn the alphabet and just memorize it. I just want to read it, learn it, and then that's how I'm going to learn it, by like just getting used to it, and then slowly over time. So we have the Russian, the Romanized Russian, the Cyrillic, and then we have the English below, and that's what I use when I'm kind of learning and kind of going through my Russian.
For sure. Yeah. If I were a Russian learner, what I would like to see from something like Lingopie is properly accented Russian, because they've got that vowel reduction going on. So it might
Mm-hmm.
be spelled like an O, but it's actually pronounced like an A, and things like that. And I've seen some dictionaries do this, but I think it would be really cool if just in the subtitle, right, while you were reading it, you could see the stress marks um, in real time. That's, if
That
I
is
were a
interesting.
Russian learner.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we do that. I have to. I haven't looked at it in recently, but it's interesting. Yeah, we're always looking to kind of improve that side. Like, yeah, obviously, like that's the bread and butter here. Everything on it. Where I think we roll out some new change to the translation bubble, to the video player, to kind of what we do with the grammar, all that, on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's been a while since I used Lingopie intensively.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I subscribed to it because you guys occasionally have really good deals if you get a year
Sure.
all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I I think I did the math once, and it was around the time that like Netflix raised their prices, and a year of Lingopie actually, because all I use Netflix for was language learning. I'm not really like a
Yep.
series kind of guy. I think I did the math, and at one point I'm like, a year of Lingopie is actually cheaper than a year of Netflix. So I went ahead and I pulled the trigger. And what kept me using Lingopie was the fact that I can do it on my tablet. You don't have to be sort of stuck at your computer with your mouse and your keyboard. I know there's a native app now, I think, for Android and iOS, but
Yeah.
I think I had better success using the browser version on my tablet for some reason. I can't remember, but I remember just being happy that I think you had this, I think it was like a Colombian telenovela. And I remember, I think I watched like all 100 episodes of it
Oh
on
my
my
God,
tablet
that's amazing.
on the browser in my tablet, which I think is kind of cool because, you know,
Yeah.
I sit at my computer all day for work. I don't necessarily want to sit at my computer to study a language, you know.
Sure.
And with like my native with English, with my English habits, I'll finish work and I'll go sit on the couch and scroll on my phone, you know, watch like in 2024 people use their phone and their tablet, you know. It's not
Of course.
2006 where you have to be at a computer.
Of course.
And you guys are adding new features. I think I get your all's emails, and I think I got an email a couple months ago with like you can cast somehow if you have like an
Yeah.
Android TV or a smart
Yeah.
TV. How does that work?
Yeah. So number one, you can cast directly from the apps. So like you can just watch it on your television. That's automatically synced with your phone. So the subtitles are on your phone. You can click on the subtitles on your phone, get the instant translations, all that. But you have the TV show or movie playing with the dual subtitles, or with one set of subtitles, or whatever you want. You can also slow down the speed again, which is a really important feature to be able to focus on the pronunciation. But just to give you a peek into what's coming, we are right now kind of in the final stages of launching native TV apps. So you'll be able to get it on Android TV, Roku, on all those things, and you'll be able to just like get Lingopie on your television, use your kind of whatever remote control to kind of scroll left, right on the subtitles as they're playing, click, and watch from your couch, from the comfort of your, wherever you want to watch it, on a massive screen, which I think is amazing. So again, you're right. You can do it on your desktop or on your laptop or, on your phone, in, web, mobile, iOS, Android. But we want you to be able to use it where you feel comfortable. I think that's important on your tablet. So we're always trying to, again, add new features that allow you to do that and just extend that functionality. I'm really excited to be able to watch it on my television again natively. I'll tell you, like, and if I think even further out, one thing that gets me really excited is to be able to watch it on like the Lingopie and like maybe the Vision Pro or something on like 100-foot screen, and I can just reach out and touch a subtitle and get like an instant translation and like scroll down and get like some grammatical information. Like that's and the amazing thing is I wouldn't be surprised if that's something we do in the next like year, because it's here, right?
Man, yeah. Lingopie is sort of a cutting edge in some ways. It's done a lot of things that I think people wish had been done sooner.
Sure.
The use case that I see for Lingopie
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that it's done for you. I mentioned this earlier, but like, we have this concept of sentence mining. It's where you take a word, like a target word, like I want to know that word, and you make it into a flashcard. And like that's built into Lingopie. when you do the lookup, you sort of, and I think it even uses the video, like the actual scene
Exactly.
from what you're watching. It will actually have that
Exactly.
scene as like a video, audio, visual sort of flashcard built
Mm-hmm.
in. And when I think of people like my parents, you know, if I wanted to say, "Hey, Dad, you need to learn German," he's not going to be able to sit down and like figure out. And I love FOSS stuff. I love free open source um, software, but it's not convenient. When I'm thinking of like, hey, my aunt who's in her 60s wants to learn Spanish, I can say go get Lingopie and watch telenovelas on your phone or some. It's all there in one package. Um,
Exactly.
and I think that
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that just having it in one package is nice, and then not being locked at your computer is so huge, so huge. I cannot overstate how much of a gap in the market there is for sort of a language learning meta layer that supports video. It's not just
Sure.
like a text with a pop-up dictionary that works on your phone or your tablet.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think allowing you, like I said, experience, language learning in whether where you are is really important. So in making it comfortable, allowing you to immerse in different situations with different types of content also. So that's been kind of something that we've really put a lot of effort on. But so you mentioned the flashcards. We also have various games. So I'm not sure when you tried it last, but we've also kind of like built out a bunch of different games and a lot of different additional features, especially around the word list to give you, let's say, deeper information around, grammar structures, things like that as well, to kind of allow people to go further from based on kind of the content and the words and phrases that they've experienced and been exposed to while they watch. So
Mm.
we also tell you like how many times you've been exposed to that word to give you a sense again of how whether you're learning it and and how your mastery uh, of let's say the words you're kind of experiencing. Um, One thing I think that's interesting is that like language by itself, like everyone talks about, oh, we have this like spaced repetition algorithm in, for example, in Duolingo here and there, but like language, when you hear spoken language day to day, it has spaced repetition built into it. You don't need to
Mhm.
do that. You don't need to build
Mm.
that in. You don't need to like improve or test or add kind of silly gamification and give your stars and bonuses to that. It's like naturally there, right? And television and film, I think, is naturally immersive in that sense. So um, I think one of the things that, what I've always seen is that like, it's very hard to convince a person to say, oh, go do grammar exercise or memorization exercise or translation exercise for even 10 minutes a day, right? Because if you do that 10 minutes a day, it'll be effective. But but on the flip side, if I tell you to go watch an amazing TV show or movie, nobody ever says I don't have time for that. We find time for that. And that's kind of, I think, how we're trying to kind of marry these two things together.
Sure. Yeah, it's we at Refold we talk a lot about comprehensible input, and that's sort of where the meta layer comes in, and having
Sure.
the dictionary lookups. But a big part of that is compelling input. You want, I dabbled in Hebrew once upon a time,
Mm,
and I was watching like Israeli sitcoms and not understanding a whole bunch, but it was definitely immersive. I enjoyed it. I
very cool.
watched one called Ashota Atov, I think.
Okay.
Uh, it's buddy cop sitcom. Um,
Hotel
uh,
Hayatov. Okay. I don't think I've seen it, but I've heard of it.
yeah, Hashoter Hatov, I think.
Yeah, Hotel, yeah, the good
Um,
cop.
yeah, and uh, I also think I watched a show called like Stiesel, maybe, which
Diesel. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, and like I just enjoyed it because like just seeing this content and having fun, and I think it's a lot more approachable. I love languages and I can read about grammar and stuff, but no one wants to sit there, and even getting them to do 10 minutes, which is something we actually recommend at Refold. We recommend like doing 10 minutes a day of grammar study, because it's useful. But even getting people to do that, it's like pulling teeth and herding cats. And it's been a while since I've used Lingopie, but I did have a period a couple of years ago where I was using it pretty religiously, just because, again, the fact that I could do it on my tablet was huge to me. And I occasionally take peeks at Lingopie to see the updates. And I know at some point you guys even added like audiobooks.
Yeah, we have audiobooks and podcasts as well.
Yeah,
and by the way, we also support at this point, if you're a subscriber to Netflix as well, so you can use that in your phone, in the Android app, on the web product as well. So you can just log into your app via Lingopie, and you'll be able to watch everything with like a Lingopie layer on top as well on desktop. We also have an extension. Obviously, a lot of other people have extensions, but ours, I think, is way better, just because we've done the work of making the subtitles match and really good, and the translation is really good.
Okay, so I am not a Netflix subscriber, unfortunately. There are other things I would rather spend my $15 a month on.
Totally. Lingopie.
But Lingopie is a good example.
We'll hook you up, Clayton. We'll hook you up with a subscription after. Don't worry.
But you're telling me that you can sign in on Lingopie.
Yeah.
Sign into Netflix through the Lingopie app, and then you can do the lookups with the meta layer, like on your tablet or whatever.
Yeah. Similar to Language Reactor, but you're doing it through either the Android app, or it doesn't. We're still not. It still doesn't work fully with iOS, but we're able to do it with.
Imagine iOS has problems, because I think I'm not like a dev, but I work
with
a lot of devs.
Lockdown platform, yeah.
Yeah, the APIs, the different Android apps can talk to each other, whereas iOS is like, this app can't talk to this app. They don't make it easy.
Yeah. Look, I'm a big fan of a lot of things that Apple does, but they're definitely more evil.
Yeah, I'm an Android guy. I love sideloading like unique little GitHub apps and all sorts of things.
I'm with you.
That is amazing. So I wish I had Netflix. I would use it with Lingopie, because again, a big blocker for me is I spend 8, 9, 10 hours at my computer, and I don't want to do my language learning at my computer.
Sure.
That's cool. I didn't know that. I saw that you guys had added some Netflix support, but I don't know. I was vaguely aware. I think I got like an email, like I think there's like a meta layer plugin for Chrome or Chromium, and like
Chrome, Safari as well.
Yeah, it was on my radar, but I assumed it was something you had to be at your computer to do.
No.
So if you're
also music as well. So if you're into, like, if you want to listen to music videos, we have a ton of music videos, and I think in all the languages we support, but definitely in the majority.
Okay, wow, that is, I don't know, that is that has truly impressed me. The fact that you can watch all of Netflix's content with the meta layer on your tablet.
It's not all the Netflix content, because again, what we've done is we've curated it, because we believe that we want to give you a curated experience. So it's not like, again, there's a ton of, for example, in all the languages we support, there's a ton of content in it. But what we've done is we're doing it different. It's not like, for example, in Language Reactor and some of these other products, you just navigate around Netflix and you kind of do your thing. Lingopie is the destination, and then we kind of, and then you click on what you want to watch, and then you kind of are you're technically in Netflix, but it's really like a Lingopie layer on top.
Okay.
So it's a bit of we're doing it the other way,
Gotcha. Well, that's still
which we think is a
good
much better
though.
experience because again,
The
people are used to the Lingopie experience, and that's what we're giving you.
very cool. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. It's sort of like if you go to a restaurant that has a hamburger, a cheeseburger, and a salad, then you're going to get a hamburger, a cheeseburger, or a salad. And if you go to a restaurant that has like 50 different types of hamburgers, it's a lot harder to choose. So if Lingopie's
Exactly.
gone through these Netflix things and set them up to work with Lingopie and sort of provides something that's going to be relatively decent, right? You're not sort of shooting in the dark.
Of course.
And that's something a lot of, I don't want to say newer language learners, people who are newer to sort of immersing in content struggle with is actually there's content out there for everything. Like really, there are tiny little languages spoken by 1,000 people that have radio dramas. But for your person who is living in New York or Tel Aviv, they're not going to find those, and if they do find them, they're not going to know what's good. Right.
Exactly.
And that's where the curation comes in. I'm still blown away that you can watch some of the Netflix content on your phone or tablet and have the meta layer on your mobile. That's huge to me. I can't overstate it. Really, I do like 100%. So I'm a big link user. And the big thing for me was the fact that it's cross-platform. I can upload a book on my computer, and then I can go read it on my phone or my tablet. So to me, mobile use is huge. So consider me impressed. I am totally blown away.
Yeah, listen, I'd love to kind of, we'll get you an account and, I'd love to hear your feedback.
Sure. I'll be happy to provide it. Speaking of Lingopie content, how does I don't know, maybe that's a trade secret. How does that work? I've seen, so when I was an active user of Lingopie, I saw a bunch of like classic telenovelas, but then I also saw some other stuff. I saw some indie stuff, like it seemed like there was a whole bunch of Argentinian sort of like indie art short films. It seemed like there were a couple of YouTube content creators as well. So it was a mix of like, there were like big name studios, like, classic Colombian telenovelas. And then there was also some stuff like YouTubers. And then there was also some more interesting stuff. Some of the art films from Argentina I watched were like, not really my jam, but how does that work? How do you guys get content and decide what content to put on Lingopie?
Yeah, so again, we have quite large licensing team that's out there looking for interesting things, talking to different production companies, going to festivals, which is I think a pretty cool job. So what they're doing is they're looking at that content, then they when they find something interesting, they give it to our languages team and they review it, as I kind of mentioned before. Earlier. Yeah, exactly. And they're and if it's interesting for us, we think it has something there, and we're not always right. Sometimes we'll license something and it's like definitely not renewing that. But what we'll do is we'll license it, and then we'll see if people like it. The stuff people like, we try to keep around, and if it's not great, then we kind of get rid of it. We're tracking in that sense on that one side of the business. We're very much like a VOD platform or any type of Hulu or Netflix without, which obviously are significantly bigger than us, but the idea is the same. So we try to work with these different distributors to find something interesting, and then we load it into the platform and allow people to kind of view it and things like that. So obviously we're getting.
I guess you guys have metrics. You probably see what shows people really like and what shows don't get a lot of interest.
Of course, we know pretty quickly. So then we try to sub out that content. There's a whole thing about managing the catalog, right? So we try to and
Mhm.
we try to keep it fun and light and add new content all the time. So, we're trying to add and spice up, add new content, remove old content, shuffle the content. Right now, we're producing a bunch of our own content um, as well. So we've started doing that, both video content, but now we're starting to branch out into other types of content as well. Maybe more like audio books and even like short stories and things like that. We're building a whole new like reader experience, which will be very cool, Clayton. So I'm going to be interested to hear what you say when we'll give you beta access.
All right,
But
sweet.
yeah, but yeah, it's basically like on that side of the business, it's very much like a content licensing
So,
process. In the
not to
beginning, I will say
pry.
it was difficult. It was a difficult thing to do because like you know, who are you? Why should we,
Why should we
this
license to
massive
you?
100 billion dollar like broadcaster, work with you guys, right? But in
Mhm.
that sense, we really built something, and I think we've really built an amazing reputation actually in the video side of the business. So our partners really look at us as having a unique, a very unique way to tap into a global audience that is interested in let's say local content, right? So like
Mhm.
the audience for German content is typically in Germany, right? And then maybe 2 or 3 shows will get licensed out of Germany in Netflix or here and there. But the majority of it is in Germany, right? But I think one
Mhm.
of the beautiful things that we've done is we've brought to our partners, which are these again, massive broadcasters, publishers, and distributors, the ability to reach a global audience, gather this global audience of, let's say, German speakers, Italian speakers, all over the place who want to learn with that content in geographies everywhere, right? That they can't get to. And I think
Sure,
that's
and
kind of, one of the
that's
magical things we've
definitely a
built.
barrier.
Yeah.
The I don't know what they call it, geolocking, you
Yeah.
know, and you probably do have like a Netflix account or some sort of streaming service account, and you said that you travel a lot, right? You spend your time in
Yeah.
London, New York, and Tel Aviv, and I'm sure
Mhm.
you've noticed the catalog changes every time
Of
you
course.
move,
Of
um,
course.
and that's one thing that's
It's one of the
really
first things I do. It's one of the first I love to see like what changes. It's actually fun.
So, from my perspective, one thing that I have had struggles helping people in the language learning community with and content recommendations is licensing. It's very complicated. A show may be licensed on one service and then 1 month and gone the next,
Mhm.
or it may not be licensed in your country at all. Um, and uh, that is, yeah, that seems like a very complex issue.
It it definitely is, and we try to be cognizant of that. So either we try to find a way to do global rights, or we do it in a way that allows, there is rights management, of course, because
Mhm.
different rights and different partners, but we manage it, of course, on our side. But we try our very best to do as much around global rights as possible, which I think is very different. Um, we really kind of pioneered this new type of licensing because we are using it for like educational language learning, and our partners really love us, and they really love kind of what we do. So we do have this kind of flexibility there, which is I think very different than what you would see in your standard type VOD platform.
So, because you guys do a lot with global licensing, that means that somebody who subscribes who lives in Italy and somebody who lives in, say, Japan or the Philippines, they're not going to have a vastly different catalog.
No,
The bulk
vastly
of,
different.
yeah. So the bulk of the catalog will be available to people in
Yeah.
all markets.
Yeah, the one area I would say you'll see some differences is, let's say, if we're licensing Italian content, so that typically will not be available. The let's say a certain amount of
In
that content
Italy.
for partners in Italy, but we
Okay.
do get a lot of content available. We make sure that we compensate for that with other types of content that is there.
Mhm.
right? Because again,
Okay.
let's say you're like a local broadcaster, they may want to reserve some of those rights locally. Not in all cases, but in some cases. So you may
Right.
see differences there.
So if you're learning Italian on Lingopie in Italy, you may have a slightly different catalog because the local licensing and all of that. And that makes total sense. But
Yeah, exactly.
if you're learning Italian in America and you're learning Italian in, Argentina, that's where you would see like similar
Yeah,
content
you
in the
would see very
catalogs.
similar. Yeah, again, not 100%, just because again, as you mentioned, it's
Incredibly complex.
managing rights uh, it's a challenge. It's a fun challenge, but yeah.
Very cool. So, David, we have about 10 minutes left. Thank you so much for this time.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't bring up that you wanted to talk about? Any cool stuff
Mm.
going on with Lingopie that you wanted to
There's
talk about, mention?
there's so much. There's so much. Every day is its own amazing fun challenge where what can I say? We're I just want to stress that we're always launching new features and new products. We love to get feedback from our community, either directly in our Discord.
You guys have a
You know,
Discord?
of course, who doesn't?
Amazing. Okay.
2024.
We'll have to put that. Yeah, I'm gonna join that. We'll have to put it in the little the comment box. I'm pointing down here. It used to be down here, but I think now they changed it. It's like on the right or the left. I don't know, but we'll put it in the description
Okay.
for sure and get people in there. That's really cool. I didn't know that. And I can confirm that Lingopie does seem to do updates pretty often. I'm almost sure that I get emails with updates. I feel like I do.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what was something cool and interesting that we just discussed, or we're launching today.
So you
Um,
mentioned that Hebrew and Arabic are sort of in the pipeline.
yeah, it's coming later in the year. Exactly.
You mentioned the native smart TV support is
Yeah,
coming.
native space support. We're working on to give you a peek. We're working on a new feature which will break longer TV shows and movies into, let's call them chapters, right? So you'll be able to break out longer pieces of content into, let's say, smaller chapters, and each chapter will then we're gonna bubble up let's say different things based on your level that you should kind of pay attention to and learn. So that's going to be something new that's coming. We're working on totally different type of experience around kind of like building out some sort of a reader. So you'll be able to kind of with stories and things like that, which is really cool. There's always, on a weekly basis, we're working on. Oh, and I also, if you don't mind, I'm happy to offer the your audience, a discount to Lingopie as well. You can go to lingopie.com/refold, and I think you're going to get like a 60% discount on Lingopie. So
Yeah,
shameless
that's
plug. I'm
awesome.
sorry,
I mean, that's totally
yeah,
fine. Plug away.
yeah,
Yeah, the cool thing about Lingopie, and like having you on is that it's a tool that I'm familiar with. I was a very religious user for at least, I think I had a year sub at one point for at least a year. So it's something that, I've definitely used and can recommend.
amazing.
Amazing. That's wild. I had no clue. There's all this cool stuff, all these cool changes. I've met now 2 people from the Lingopie company. I've met you, David, and then I've met Pedro, and everybody has been so awesome and friendly. And you guys have a Discord. I live on Discord. I'm like a
Amazing.
Discord.
Good.
I'm like a Discord server rat. I love to get in there and chat languages with people
Amazing,
and
amazing.
stuff. Very cool. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for giving everybody here, like all of the Refold viewers, people in the Refold community, an awesome discount. And I'm looking forward to sliding into the Discord and poking around and maybe checking out some of the new changes
Sure.
to Lingopie, because it's been a while since I've used it. Honestly, I think it was 2 apartments ago. So however many,
I
it's been
love
a
that.
year or two. It
I
was 2
love that.
apartments ago.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So
David,
I'll shoot over, the discount link. You can throw it in the description. I'll, and, obviously we'll hook you up, and you or anyone in the community, always happy if you guys have suggestions, feedback, whatever. That's what we live off. That's how we make this product better. So, this was amazing, Clayton. Super, super great chatting to you. Anytime, just let me know. Happy to jump on. Let's keep, and this is, where we, let's make language learning kind of universal. Let's do it.
for sure. All right, David, and I may have you back on. It was awesome.
This has been great.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join and chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.